feel like now is probably just a brilliant time to mention that I am really afraid of boats.
I fell in a lake when I was 8. I was on the dock.
Oh no.
How do you think you'll feel after being on the boat?
Soggy,
Traumatized. I mean, if I fall in the water, you will know.
I'll be quite full.
If you fall in the water, I will be like, oh. If I don't see a kraken, I'm gonna cry. If I don't see Cthulhu, I'm gonna cry.
So I've heard that you've been exploring around in Firth and just gone on different trips, and I'd really love to hear a little bit about is there any memorable experience that you had where you were like, wow, that really changed my perspective on something, or that's something that I will definitely remember and from this summer and that I'm excited about?
I don't know. It's going to seem really silly, but it's probably the most memorable for me because it was the first time I'd been on a boat. Because I had always been really afraid of boats. I still don't like them, but I'm less afraid of them now, I guess.
I think this is less about the actual trip itself, but when we were going to the Isle of May and seeing all the birds, we couldn't actually go on the island because of the bird flu. And I remember coming home and the next day seeing a news report saying that, oh my god, I was just there yesterday and the birds are dying. I didn't know they were dying. I didn't know. I guess it's kind of there's so much going on, just roundabout, that you just have no idea. That might not be answering the question very well, but it's.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think sometimes it's interesting to sort of realize, what are the places that we're seeing that maybe still, seem pristine and intact and everything. You realize that, they're in threat because of climate change and because of pollution, different environmental areas and species that are then threatened. Is there anything particularly that you learned on your trips about, all of you, that you learned about, I don't know, environment or climate change that you didn't know?
I think throughout the trip, I don't remember many conversations actually about climate change, but I do remember a lot about the actual wildlife. And obviously in the Isle of May, they were talking about the birds, and I think, was it the third trip, it was a coastal walk, and we were learning about the rare butterflies that frequent the area that we were visiting. They only come around that area because they only eat one type of flower. It only grows in so many areas in the UK, and that was quite interesting. But I don't remember many conversations about actual climate change.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's definitely something that I think overall in society we need to probably increase, having that conversations, because often I think they framed as something, negative to talk about. Maybe something will appear on news now and then, but I think it's less in our conversations than maybe it should be. Talking about, what are the changes that we can create, what are the changes that are happening, and framing that. What do you think? Do you think there's something that you hear about often on the day-to-day, or do you think, or even at school, do you think you get a good teaching around, do people around climate change? Because I know there's a lot of campaigns, youth campaigns, for example, that's saying, schools, our education on climate change is not sufficient enough. What do you feel? Do you think that rings true for you as well?
I mean, for me, I don't think I've gotten taught enough about climate change. That hasn't been anything I've never been taught what we can do. I've just been taught the end game. And even in conversations, it's I had a conversation with my friend the other day, and he said, I watched a YouTube video last night and it said we're all going to die in 5 years. So you need to be careful. And then they would go on, and that's kind of just the conversations we've been having, because I don't think we're actually getting told enough in school of how to prevent it. And we were kind of at a point where it's just we just have to accept it, because what can we do? What are we gonna do? We haven't even passed, we don't even have our exam results. Who knows? We're not really in a position to go out and do stuff. We're still studying, but we still have this amount of pressure on us that we're supposed to fix everything instead of the people that actually have the power to. That went on a bit off topic, but yeah.
No, not at all. I think that's exactly what we're talking about here in terms of that. There's so much anxiety and pressure put onto young people to act on climate change, but at the same time, often we're not taught about what are the changes that we can actually create, and what are the tools, you know? I don't think we're given tools to deal with the problems that we're facing in our world. We're talked about a lot of things that are happening, maybe that have happened in the past, and that are maybe even outdated things that aren't really relevant to our future and how we are going to create this different world. And I think that's something that we really need to challenge and push for, that is done, because at the end of the day, like, this is something that, regardless of what area of work or job or whatever all of us decide to do, that is something that we will have to deal with, and maybe in different ways. But like, to know how it's all interconnected is so important. And I think it's really interesting to hear that, you know, it's still even with the things that are happening, it's still not taught enough. Anything that you guys want to add?
Kind of off the point of like not having enough resources and stuff like that, but kind of thought I should ask you this. Do you feel like that you need to take responsibility for their actions and to fix what they've done? Because I experience it a lot with my mother, because when I focus on climate change, I mostly focus on fast fashion production and fashion in general, and my mother has specifically told me that she doesn't care at all about not only the ethics of fast fashion, but also the waste production of fast fashion.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, and that's really hard, I think, especially with people that you like at family. I know, like, especially when I first decided to go vegan, that was like something that was hard, for example, in terms of like finding that balance with like friends and family, in terms of coming to terms with that maybe not everyone will support you on the journey. And I think that is something that I guess everyone will struggle with to some extent. But at the same time, you know, there's always people that you will meet, or friends or whatever, that will maybe take actions that you don't support. And I think the best thing that you can do is try and talk to them about it and have quite serious discussions around, you know, morally as well, like, it is about our future. But then also not feeling like you have to take responsibility for every single person's interaction of who you meet. And at the same time, we also have to realize that it's not all about, to not be careful that we don't frame everything in terms of individual action, because at the end of the day, the core emissions are from firstly the top 1% in the world, and also from companies.
I do actually have one last question though. Is that if you had any sort of advice for a young activist, like for someone who's sort of starting out in their sort of eco-activism journey and they want to help as much as they can, what would be your advice for them?
My advice would be to find a group of people that you can talk to this about, and sort of like find a community. And also join an activist group, I think. Join a local group, a youth activist group, or maybe around a specific issue that you heard about and you're like, this is interesting, I want to know more about it. Not even if you're not 100% sure yet, this is your topic area or passion, you're just like, I want to know more about this. I also want to see these people that are in the space, because obviously, depending on where you are, there might be different people in different spaces that you will connect with more than others. And really finding a space where you can see yourself working with, campaigning with other people. And I think also making sure you speak about this, really creating a voice platform to speak with others about it, and also to challenge that idea of, you know, it's all just bad apocalypse, we can't do something about it. And also challenge, especially if adults tell you this, it's all just bad, saying, well, no, this is not the way that I want to talk about my future. And that's not the way that I want to see my future. And if that's what you know, then we should work together to try and change that.
It does really feel like there's been like a wall broken down, because, as I said earlier, climate change, especially in my school, my community, it's just very much hush hush. The inevitable apocalypse that's going to come raining down, we don't talk about it. So I feel like this is just like a positive kind of just a discussion, and it's made me feel a lot better about it. Not a lot better, because I still see it as this horrible thing that may happen that may all come crashing down on us one day, but it's better than seeing the news and seeing how people don't even believe that climate change is an issue, or seeing the government talk more about, I don't know, who's going to be the next Prime Minister rather than the earth that's like boiling alive. But yeah, I just feel like it's been a positive kind of just a discussion that's kind of, I think it's always good to start a discussion about topics like this.
Yeah, thank you.
Mars?
Yeah. I feel like going off from that, it's good that we've managed to have this conversation like about climate change and about our wildlife that we as humans are harming. And I feel like the more we talk about it and the more we do to try and like help really ourselves, the better and the more involved people are going to become.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let's wrap up the session here. And thank you for staying on so diligently and so long. This is definitely longer than everyone expected, I'm sure, but and me included. Thank you. Okay, take care, everyone. If you have any questions or anything, you can reach me on social media is probably easier. You will much easier reach me on Instagram probably than email. But if you have any questions, want to reach out and have further discussion, very happy to do that. And yeah, take care. Have a good rest of your weekend.
Thanks, Léa.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
See you later. Have a good
Later.
day. Bye bye.